What is up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health and social well-being. On screen, you guys are about to see a full week's worth of training from Monday of last week, June 1st, starting on my secondary squad day, all the way to this most recent Monday, June 8th, this most recent secondary squad day. And as this is playing, just want to kind of talk to you guys very briefly about the importance of not making unnecessary changes and not being afraid to rerun a successful training block. Because you guys are going to see here, with the block that I'm currently doing, it is very, very similar to how I ran my last block. One difference, and really the only major difference, is on the secondary squat days, instead of doing SSB squats, we are now doing high bar squats. And that is simply due to the fact that for the past few blocks, I've done SSB squats for my secondary day. So in order to just kind of, get a little bit of novel stimulus, as well as do a variation that just has a little bit more carryover to my comp specific squat, I am deciding to do high bar squats, as well as the fact that just anytime I really dial in my high bar squats, it really just helps me with getting in an overall nice stack position, and that carries over to my low bar squat very, very well. As I've explained to you guys before, I don't ever really comp squat 3 times a week, just because it tends to make me feel not great with my positioning when I do it 3 times a week. So having my primary heavy day be comp squats, then a variation of some sort as a secondary day such as high bar, and then the third squat day of the week is just usually some light percentage based comp squats to help me feel primed for my primary day. So still running that same kind of scheme, but aside from that, you're going to see that pretty much everything else is the same as the previous block that I ran in terms of like my secondary squat day, how it's set up. It's just with high bar, secondary bench day, working up to a higher rep top set, and then having some back down sets. My tertiary squat day is, like I said, light percentage based squat. Working on that same day is also my secondary pull day, where I work up to a top triple, then some back down work based upon that. Then I've got my tertiary bench day, which you guys are going to see is Larson press, and then of course my SBD day is my primary squat day, working up to a top triple. So we're running triples again, a top single on deadlifts, and then some light, easy percentage based bench work, and then my heavy bench day is the day after that, which we are once again, as I said, rerunning triples, the same we did last block. So very few changes. The only things that have really changed is, for example, if I was doing like 3 sets of 5 on something, now we're doing stuff like 4 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 4, just with a slightly different percentage drop, just so that there is some type of volume increase, so that we are building and technically doing a little bit, ensuring that we're doing a little bit more workload, even if hypothetically I were to hit the exact same numbers for my top sets, because the percentage drop has changed and the sets and reps have changed on some of the movements. I'm still getting more total workload, but that's it. And the reason that Brad and I have decided to just make these small changes and essentially rerun the block is because I had such a successful block previously. You guys saw that I was just like, hitting PRs across the board. Like that first week, I was kind of like just establishing a good baseline where I pretty much, hit the highest numbers I ever had for a starting point of a block for, what my prescribed sets and reps were on each day. And then for the next 3 weeks after that, I was just hitting PRs. Everything was feeling really, really good. So we were like, okay, for that reason, since it went so well, let's just rerun it again. Let's run the triples for 3 more weeks. Let's kind of run everything as it is for like, 3 to 4 more weeks. And then after that, depending on how it goes, we can decide to like, undulate some things where maybe transition to doubles, make some, more changes to the block. But the reason we're doing this is for the mere fact of, if it's not broken, why try to fix it? Sometimes we feel the need that, oh man, a block went really, really well, we got to keep the momentum going. So what do we need to change to keep the momentum going? When sometimes the reality is, guys, if you want to keep the momentum going, you need to just keep doing the same thing. Now, like I said, you need to do some type of adjustments to where there is some type of increased workload, because you are trying to build, especially if you're doing a whole lot of RPE based work and not as much maybe percentage of 1 rep max work. Then you need to account for the fact that if you rerun the block, and let's just say hypothetically, like I said, you end up paying the exact same numbers for those top sets, well, you need your percentage drops to be a little bit different, or some type of increase in rep sets, something to where you are getting more workload in. But aside from that, it's like, if a formula worked really, really well, chances are it's going to work really, really well again. Now, after you rerun it, a second or third time, and you feel like you're starting to get diminished returns, then you can start to change things up. And mind you, it's different when you're closer to a meet. You need to kind of have things planned out in some form of progression anyway. But in the case of where I'm at, where I'm not going to be competing for a while, we have more leeway to where if something just felt really, really good, we can rerun it again. Now, with that being said, just kind of due to everything that was going on last week, I did stretch myself pretty thin, on top of my usual like client workload that I had going on. I was constantly engaging with friends, family, being on podcasts, just trying to be there for people, let people vent. People want to pick my brain about what I thought was going on, and just hear my thoughts on everything. Like, I pretty much was at a point where I was engaging with people from the moment I woke up to the time I went to bed, including when I was training, like just constantly being on my phone, responding to client work as well as everything else. So eating was awful in the sense of when the week started, was chilling around like 173, 174, got as low as 168. So eating was that bad. Stress was very, very high. Without even realizing it, just because I tend to pour from an empty glass, just wasn't taking care of myself, and sleep just wasn't great either. So you guys are going to see that on my primary day, which you guys are seeing right now. Things just didn't move as smoothly as what they have been the past few weeks. This 440 for 3, like, it moved decently, but nowhere near as well as how it moved the previous block, and nowhere near as well as the 430 from the week before. And the reality is, even though it doesn't look that bad, it felt even worse than how it looked, and it definitely didn't look as good as what it did before. Same thing with my back down sets, my deadlift, and you guys are going to see my heavy bench the next day. Just all across the board, nothing felt particularly good. And that's when I got to the point where I realized, I'm like, okay, I've really stretched myself thin. I got to get back on top of my recovery. Got to take my time to kind of pull back, detach. And that's a whole social well-being video that I need to do for another time, in terms of like just taking care of yourself and detaching, and the importance of not letting yourself be so consumed with everything going on around you, especially in this age of social media where we can consume so much. But that's a separate topic for another time. But the point is, I realized that, okay, if I want to rerun this block and rerun it successfully, I need the variables to be the same too. That's another thing to keep in mind, guys. If something worked really well, it wasn't probably just the programming itself. You have to look at all the outside variables as well. Last block, my stress was very, very low. I was eating really, really well, sleeping really, really well, which is generally always in a good mood. And even though, I had the usual client work and was engaging with that, that's obviously been increased too, just because more things are opening up. So more of my clients have been able to come back and train. Pretty much at this point, all my clients are back in the full swing of things. So I'm obviously busier. So I have to keep that in mind with the things that I'm trying to redo with this block. But the point is assuming I get all that back on point, which you guys are going to see like in the preceding videos after this, what I've done to kind of get things back on point and get the fatigue back managed, because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm already in the middle of the block. I don't want to necessarily have to deload in the middle of the block or scale things back unnecessarily, but you guys are going to see in the future videos what I did with the upcoming training week after the one you're seeing now, in order to get everything back on point so I can continue to push and finish out the block strong. But it's important to keep that in mind regardless, that at the end of the day, if you're going to rerun a block, you want the variables to be the same. You want the eating to be on point. You want the sleep to be on point, and the stress. I told you guys in that last Q&A video that to me, when it comes to like the most important factors for recovery, right after sleep, it is stress, because the two tend to go hand in hand. If you're not getting a whole lot of sleep, that's going to put stress on the body. And if you're going through a lot of stress, that tends to make it a lot harder to sleep. And those two things, I feel, really can make or break you, even more than your food. You can get away with having your eating being a little bit off track for a few days or even a week or two. But a few days of like high stress or sleeping can really, really wreck you. And that is what I experienced this past week. So definitely glad that at this point, I've gotten that managed, gotten that back on track. But the point is that I'm expecting to have another very successful block, just due to the fact that my last block was successful and I did not change too much. Now, granted, a lot of it's going to depend on how I'm feeling going forward now that I've kind of gotten these things on track. But assuming that I wouldn't have had this stressful week that I did this past week, I would assume that everything would be moving even better, just because of how the first week of this block went. It was much better than the first week of last block, despite the variables being the same, just because, of course, if you built well with the previous block, you should be at a stronger point going into the next block. So I say all that to say that a lot of you need to stop overcomplicating some of this stuff. Sometimes if your coach is having you do something similar, it's not because they're lazy, it's not because they don't care, it's probably just because they know that, hey, this is working and they want it to work well for you. Or if you're coaching yourself, trust yourself. I'm very fortunate to where I don't usually have this issue with my own clients. Like if a block goes really well for them and then we kind of rerun it, they kind of already have an understanding of why, and I'm always down to explain the why to them. But it's just one of those things where sometimes we are looking for novelty, when what we need is consistency. Not just consistency as far as being in the gym and training, but consistency in recognizing these patterns of what works for us and what doesn't. And when you find what works for you consistently across the board at any given point in time, you want to make sure you are doing that, because there's going to be more than enough times where you have to make changes. So whenever you're at a point where you don't, be happy with that and take advantage of it, because it's going to be for your betterment. When you find those patterns of success, you want to keep reworking them over and over and over again until you get to a point where you're forced to change something because you have to, not just because you want to or because you're bored and feel like if you don't, you're not going to make any progress. Because the reality is that's just not the case, guys. But yeah, that is pretty much it for this video, guys. Glad I got you all caught up. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and comment down below. Let me know what you did. If you're not, leave a comment down below. Let me know what I can get better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch you guys later.